Welcome back to Sight for Sore Eyes. My name's Ron, and I'm glad you're here. You know, back in the earlier days of my life, let's say around 1957, people were starting to purchase cameras again for their family use, and most of the times families had one camera, and usually it was a cheap Brownie or a Kodak something or other, Starmite or something like that, and took off sizes of film. And that was people's cameras. And very few families had more than one camera. And usually the one they had, like I said, was, well, I guess it wasn't really inexpensive, but back in that time, but it wasn't a very fancy camera. It had a shutter and a lens, and sometimes had a flash built in. And so they'd buy this camera and put a roll of film in it, usually black and white, sometimes color, but usually black and white back in those days. And they would hello? I don't know. It seems like I'm a little loud here. Am I a little loud? I might turn that. I think I'm going to turn that down a little bit, just a little bit lower. Hang on a minute. All right, let's see how that works. That looks a little bit better. As I was saying, photography wasn't a big deal back then. You had a family camera and you took pictures of your family. Sometimes, you go on vacation, you might take a few more pictures, but generally a roll of film would last you sometimes a month, maybe longer. You just didn't take a lot of pictures. And so when you took your last picture, whenever you could get to town again, you would, if you remembered to take the film with you, you would drop it off at the drugstore or somewhere like that, maybe a camera store if you had one around, and so you drop it off there and then go back and get it in a couple weeks, maybe a month. You'd go back and pick it up again and bring it home, and of course you get home and you take the pictures out. They came in a little envelope with the negatives in one pocket of the envelope, and the other pocket was the prints. And there was usually anywhere from, 8 to 16, or maybe 8 to 16 pictures on a roll, depending on what type of film you used. And so you'd take the pictures out. And now these weren't 4x6 glossies or nothing like that. These were printed on just basic photo paper, and they weren't enlarged for the most part. If you had a 2 1/4 inch negative, well, that's what size your prints were. And if you had a 6x7 or a 6x9 negative, then that's the size your prints were. They weren't enlarged at all. They were just more or less contact prints on a piece of photo paper, and they left about almost a 1/4 inch of white around it, a white paper around it, And so you'd look at those prints, and that was what you got, and that's usually what you kept. You would look at them, they'd be out on the counter or somewhere for a week or so, and then Mom would put them in an old cardboard shoebox with a bunch of other pictures, and that's where that was their storage area. And so that's where they stayed. And occasionally, the kids would be bored and they say, hey, let's look at pictures. Okay, so you go grab they go grab that cardboard box and dig through it, and oh, look at this, look at this, look at how stupid he looks, stuff like that, and then they just toss the pictures back in the box and don't worry about the envelopes that had the negatives in it. And so over time, everything got mixed up, and then the envelopes, sometimes with the negatives in it, they'd get spilled out, and so they're all scattered through the pictures and stuff, and then pretty soon the envelopes get thrown away, maybe, or someone just stuffs a few negatives in an envelope to keep them from being mixed with the pictures, and it just gets all messed up. So that was basically your pictures. Nobody would enlarge them for the most part. What you got back from the drugstore, that's what you had, and that's how they stayed for 50 or 80 years, whatever, And then when the parents passed away, then the kids would get them, and sometimes they keep the pictures, and sometimes they just get tossed in the trash, and sometimes it'd be sold at a yard sale, I guess. Anyway, that's how photography was back then. It was no big deal. Not like it is today. Not at all. For the most part. Very few people had a dark room. Very few people developed their own film. Very few, and just nobody printed their own pictures. It was just something for the record is what it was. So as time passed, things changed, and then 35 millimeter film came out, and the cameras, they started getting a little bit more complex, you could say, and it just kept going from there. And so I'm going to put this on the computer now, and I'm going to see how it sounds. Alrighty.